With beautiful lakes and rivers, fun days on some forest trails, and overall scenic beauty, it is no wonder why Arkansas is known as a natural state. But at one point, this state wasn't known or named for its nature, more specifically, what ruled the nature. Here's a story of the Bear State and bears in Arkansas. To first talk about bears here in Arkansas, we must talk about the first people here. The first people came to the Americas around 20,000 years ago through a frozen land bridge connecting Asia to the Americas. During the Archaic period, starting around 8000 BC, Native Americans in Arkansas used weapons like arrowheads and spears to kill small game like deer because the bigger game of the past, like the mastodon, had died out due to warmer temperatures and the end of the Ice Age. This meant that other than the bison, the black bear was the largest game animal left in Arkansas. As time went on, modern tribes developed complex social structure and society, with the Osage in particular being known for their skillful hunting and takedown of game in their hunting grounds in Arkansas. In 1541, the first Europeans came to Arkansas, with Henry de Soto and Spanish conquistadors making contact with the natives. They presented them with food and hides and buffalo skins, which was a sign of the powerful hunting skills their society had and the plentiful nature of the land there. And although the contact wasn't exactly friendly, it marked a seismic shift that the Bear State would soon have. Fur trading became increasingly lucrative and was very important in developing industry in the continent. The French in particular were involved in the fur trade and especially trade with the Native Americans. These furs included beaver, otter, and of course, bear. It was traded for guns, weapons, and horses to the natives, and then the furs were used for clothing and blankets for early settlers and for people in Europe. The earliest players in this was, of course, the French, and in 1686 they established the first European settlement in Arkansas, known as Arkansas Post, in order to be a strategic trading post with the Quapaw natives there in the fur trade. As the population of North America grew, more settlers started slowly trickling into the Bear State during the 1700s. Their main source of food, though, was going to be hunting and trapping themselves. This is the time where the frontier image of Arkansas being a hunting place where big bears and game lie originated. But why were bears so useful to early settlers in Arkansas? You would think the danger might not be worth the hassle whenever there's a deer around, right? Arkansas has some of the roughest geography and terrain of any state surrounding it, with several mountain ranges and poor ability to farm during these early times. So the people there needed to hunt. Bears have a lot of meat. A medium-sized black bear from around 300 pounds will produce around 150 pounds of meat. And for a family of 3 or 4, that could last several months. The fur that a bear provides could be made into clothes and blankets, and without any sort of modern heating, that warmth is necessary to survive the cold winters that Arkansas can have in those old log pen cabins with little insulation. And because of their bears' need for hibernation, they have a high amount of fat on their bodies. This fat can be used as oil and grease, which was used by the Native Americans for cooking and shown to early French traders, and it could also be used for lamplights. So the variety of resource that the black bear provided meant that it was going to be a valuable target for any hunter. And since European settlers had firearms instead of spears and primitive weapons like the Native Americans, there was going to be much less danger in taking one down. And this primitive weapon and ferocious nature aspect of the bear meant that the Native Americans had a difficulty hunting them, and really they just respected them in their culture. But with Europeans starting to come in and a lust for fur and firearms, the decline of the bear in Arkansas had begun. As fur trapping declined in the 1700s and the American Revolution towards the end of that century, it was not until the Louisiana Purchase that people started settling in Arkansas in large numbers. During this early period, several European travelers came to Arkansas and made comments in their journals. One of the earliest was Henry Schoolcraft, who stayed with a family in northern Arkansas. His accounts were less than ideal and talked about the people as being ill-mannered and quoted saying, "The family could only talk of bears, hunting, and the like. The rude pursuits and the coarse enjoyments of the hunter state were all they knew. Their manner and conversation were altogether rough and obscene, characterized and partaking of whatever was disgusting, terrific, rude, and utter in all. This account, though unflattering, was consistent among other travelers like Fanshawe and Nuttall, but there was a more positive account by a German traveler by the name of Gerstecker. His passionate and vivid accounts of Arkansas in his journals rang true on his love of the frontier and wild aspect of the state. As he got back to Germany, he wrote several stories on Arkansas, including one about the wild sports, in which he accounted the large bear and the dangerousness of the hunting that was there, but also the adventure that was paired with it. With these firsthand accounts, other authors began writing about the state and caricaturizing the wild nature that was accounted by these travelers. One such story was of the Big Bear of Arkansas. This story, along with Charles Nolan's Bear Hunt story, were published in the Spirit of the Times, which was a publication out of New York that distincted the different types of recreation that went on across the United States. It was very dramatized and talked about the adventurous nature of bear hunting, which illustrated the wild nature that the state had. These were very popular publications and added to the state's image to a wide audience for the entire country to see. These stories helped stir the wild reputation that Arkansas had and gave Arkansas its first unofficial nickname, the Bear State, which was first seen in publication in 1858. But at this time that Arkansas got the nickname the Bear State, populations were already starting to dramatically decline, and several factors would lead to an almost complete extinction of bears in Arkansas. During the beginning of the 19th century, Arkansas wanted to build its economy based on surrounding southern states, that being primarily agricultural based. There was just a problem, though: geography. In order to create the land to be agriculturally conducive to this economic model, they would have to clear out oak and hickory forests to the west of Arkansas and unswampify the east of Arkansas. This widespread habitat destruction across the state had a profound impact on bear populations for two main reasons. One was the lack of food. Oak trees and hickory trees produce nuts that bears use as a primary food source. Secondly, was the territorial nature of bears. Bears are very territorial, and especially males hone in on their home environment, making it difficult for them to move to different environments. If they do move to different environments, it pits them in competition with other males who will violently fight to the death to compete for their own land. This double whammy of habitat destruction meant for a loss in population quickly, and by the mid-1850s, it was rare to see a bear in the state of Arkansas. Another factor that led to the rapid decline of the black bear population was pest control. People had bad sentiments towards bears, especially as Arkansas was developing more and more settlers came in and encroached on the territory. Farmers would put bounties on bears' heads to get rid of the danger they posed. Trophy hunters came in the state and killed as many bears as they possibly could because they thought they were doing the state a favor. They already had a bad reputation for being dangerous, but now there were newspapers, lots of them. There was an Oak Grove article in 1878 about a little girl playing in the snow being snatched up by a black bear. Another one in Arkadelphia told of a bear stalking and killing two railroad workers. These news stories were prevalent and widespread. Another quote from a newspaper article in 1880 said, "When a bear came trembling into town, women locked the doors, children screamed, and men trembled in their boots." By the beginning of the 1900s, the Arkansas black bear was no longer considered a pest because there simply weren't that many left. Habitat destruction also slowed down because the hard-bottom forests were already cut down and there was no need for more agricultural land since the economy of cotton that was the staple crop of the state had completely tanked since the Civil War. But there was one more factor that would lead to the almost extinction of bears in Arkansas: overharvesting. A tandem of floods and drought periods during the teens and 20s, followed up by the Great Depression, would bring a new level of poverty to an already poor state. With a large part of Arkansas being unemployed and struggling to put food on the table, the little population of black bears left didn't stand a chance. This was also a bad overharvesting period for deer, ducks, turkeys, and almost any game animal in Arkansas you can think of. Before Arkansas Post was established, it was estimated that there were 50,000 black bears in Arkansas. By the 1950s, there were only a few dozen, ironically, where the Mississippi met the Arkansas in the same region of Arkansas Post. With the stabilized economy in the 1950s and a new rebranding of Arkansas as a state of recreation and nature, there began to be a serious efforts made towards conservation for all animals and fish in the state of Arkansas. The power to do it, Arkansas Game and Fish. The Arkansas Game and Fish Commission was very powerful and had the ability to enact hunting laws across all counties without direct legislation. They began their bear saving program with 4 bears being released in the Ozarks in the late 40s. But with a population of only 50 black bears in the entire state, they needed to do more. In 1958, they started drafting a massive relocation plan and transplant of bears from Canada and Minnesota into Arkansas. By the end of the 1960s, Arkansas Game and Fish successfully transplanted 258 black bears from Minnesota and Manitoba, Canada, and released them into 2 specific regions of Arkansas, the Ozark Mountain Ranges and the Ouachita Mountain Ranges. This was because of the 2 national forests, Ozark and Ouachita National Forests. These places are federally protected and cannot be privately built upon, only leased to certain companies like logging and mining companies who are stopped and regulated from over-harvesting or over-destroying the land. These national forests provided these bears with hundreds of square miles of lightly disturbed forest land, protected by federal and state agencies. It was a perfect situation and environment for these bears to repopulate in. With the bears being transplanted into the ideal circumstances for reproduction, the Arkansas Game and Fish now had to closely monitor these new transplant populations. Black bear's natural reproduction is quite slow and complex. Where there will be multiple females in a range of land, one sole male will have territorial claim over it. So if a male bear is killed or dies without a roaming male black bear to come in the land during the exact time of female estrus, it can push the mating period back an entire year before the female population can mate with another male. If a female bear does successfully reproduce, the gestation period is quite long, similar to a human's at 6 to 8 months, and typically only 1 to 3 cubs are born. These cubs reach maturity at 5 years old, but it is unlikely that all the cubs will survive to adulthood. With a lifespan of around 20 years, missing a few breeding seasons can have an exponential impact on a population. So although there were some ideal circumstances the bears were put in, there was not a guarantee of success, and if there was, it was going to take a long time. But by the 1980s, there were over 1,000 bears in these 2 transplant ranges, and Arkansas Game and Fish decided it would be time to enact a hunting season, albeit heavily regulated. Whenever the black bear population was low and the economy was in the toilet, Arkansas tried to rename itself and rebrand itself away from the wild connotation. We were known as the Wonder State, and by the end of the World War II era, we were known as the Land of Opportunity. This was strategic moves made by our government in order to drive industry and growth into the state. But what Arkansas was known for in the 1980s was the natural beauty and outdoor views of the state, the same connotations that the first travelers here had. With new lakes created by big dam projects, fishing and water sports being bigger than ever, and the revitalization of wildlife like the Arkansas black bear, Arkansas was coming back to nature. And as Arkansas was coming back to nature, so was the black bear. Today, it is estimated there is a population of over 5,000 bears in the state of Arkansas. The incredible success of this reintroduction cannot be understated. A member of the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission said, "No other natural resource agency has ever reintroduced a large carnivore as successful as Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. It's considered the most successful of a large carnivore in history, not just Arkansas or United States, but around the world." Arkansas Game and Fish closely monitored bear populations and hunting seasons. Wildlife biologists will monitor the number and health of the population, while game wardens officiate the game and investigate illegal harvesting and poaching of bears. The current huntable population of bears is in 3 distinct sections of the state. The first 2 are the Ozark and Ouachita Mountains. This is where those original 258 black bears were transplanted. Then there is a small region of southeastern Arkansas consisting of 3 counties, Phillips, Dacia, and Arkansas. These are not transplant bears, but true Arkansas bears that were descendants from those last 50 bears that were left in the state in the 1950s. 2020 was the most successful hunting season of black bears in Arkansas since the hunting season was established back in 1980. A whopping 665 bears were taken, beating the previous record in 2018 by 88 bears. The number of bears harvested in 2020 was 13 times as many as the entire population of the state in 1950. This successful hunt was mostly in the transplant regions, though, where only 7 bears were harvested in the southeastern region. Even with such a concerningly massive harvest in 2020, Arkansas Game and Fish still thinks the population is strong and that the regulations are sufficient. The population has increased so much that a new zone is being proposed in 2021 that southern Arkansas be allowed a regulated hunting season. This tells of the increasing bear population in that region and a true tome of success to determine conservation. In 1950, there were only 3 counties in Arkansas that had recorded bears. By 2021, 80% of the state has bears, similar to the 100% that the state previously had in pre-settlement era. Throughout the entire history of the land of Arkansas, from prehistoric Native Americans to me and you right now, bears have been here every step of the way, personifying the natural and tough reputation of the people and environment here. There have been tough times for the people here, just like there was for the bears, but smart leadership and determination led to the state's growth alongside the growth of our state's true mascot. And although you might not want to run into one while you're camping, if you do, it can almost bring you back to those old times of the frontiersmen and Native Americans roaming this state centuries ago. But just make sure you have some bear spray with you, because after all, the natural state couldn't be natural without our bears.